A therapist may ask you to look at your traumas and your patterns and unpack them, where a mindfulness teacher may tell you that the self is illusory. The psychotherapist may have you examine your thought patterns and reframe them. A mindfulness teacher may tell you that you shouldn't identify with your thoughts, good or bad. In manifestation teachings, law of attraction, you're asked to get clear and focus on what you want, where non resistance will tell you that we should relinquish desire altogether. What I'm describing is just a few of the massive contradictions that I have come across in my healing journey. And if you are someone who is very dedicated and passionate about growing as a person and developing, and also you're open minded enough to dabble in different frameworks, then without a doubt, you've come across some of these contradictions yourself. This video is my journey of reconciling those, and I'm going to talk about a lot of the strengths and some of the ways that every single one of those methods falls short, and what I do to find a framework that works for me and that feels true to me, and how you could do the same thing. Not only that, but the inherent wisdom of merging and blending these ideas. Now, I am going to be talking about the common traps of bypassing, of over efforting, of overthinking. And my advice is that if you do have the self awareness and the humility to see yourself in any of these, that it's taken more as a natural rite of passage or a natural process to self actualization, as opposed to something that you're doing wrong. And you can look at it and say, oh, look at me, I am right on time, as opposed to I'll never get it right. So, with that disclaimer, I want to go ahead and start talking about mental health professionals. And probably their biggest gripe with the spiritual community and their healing techniques would be the spiritual bypassing. And I have seen this too. I had a friend, I have heard her on a couple occasions do that prayer where you tell the universe, if this person is not meant for me, I ask you to remove them from my life, and if they are meant for me, to bring us together. And while that seems like a beautiful thing to ask for, and logically that sounds great, it does take away one's own discernment and free will and action to just block the person. You see that they're not good for you and you just block them, relinquishing your right to have a say in what you want to experience. This is the positive about looking at things from a therapeutic and psychological framework, is that really skilled therapist is looking at distortions and thinkings and assumptions, and is able to very gently help you to see those, over time and with trust. And a lot of times spiritual frameworks are just focused on the energetics, external assistance versus what you can do and having that internal locus of control. So I see that as a huge strength of the therapeutic lens, but one of the biggest pitfalls is that it can become very logic heavy. And it is kind of like using the same tool that is creating the problem, which is the mind, to solve the problem. And like Ram Dass says, it's about rearranging the furniture of the room. It is still an egoic transformation. It's like you feel better because you're cleaning things up and it's prettier in there in the mind, but it is still the ego doing the work, still an egoic self-image, and those will always be fickle no matter how pretty they are. That is not even mentioning how you leave out these beautiful energetics and the extremely expansive and soothing and unifying feeling of believing in a higher power, devaluing belief and faith because it's not something that you can scientifically prove, but missing altogether the point that the value is in the implication, in the experience of living in such a way, in the feeling that it blossoms within you. And I know that what I'm saying, therapists watching this would say, oh, that's not how it works. But yes, that's exactly how it works, because psychology is based upon what can be tried and proven. Trying to take a logic and scientific view, it's the scientific study of the mind, of these concepts that are felt. You're devaluing the good that it does to one's soul, to one's heart, even if these are immeasurable quantities. And this brings me to the positive affirmation trap. And it is so valuable, yes, to live life from a positive and empowering frame. But if you're not allowing yourself to sit with tensions and to feel irritations within yourself by slapping on an affirmation, then that is a form of self abandoning. You can't bypass that depth of awareness with a surface level positive whatever. The better way would be to feel the discomfort and then release into positivity after, after you've allowed yourself to be with and accept what is. Because then the positivity is rooted and it's not just surface level. And then deep meditation, beautiful practice, and it brings you into touch with that stillness within you that is independent of any labels or of any circumstance, which is a lot more solid than an egoic image. You're not dependent upon a certain condition, upon having a certain job or making a certain amount of money or living in a certain place or looking a certain way. It's an inherent value of just from existing that you can feel and get in touch with when you do deep meditative practices. You also cultivate spaciousness and you start to notice and allow spaciousness between thoughts and between the breath. And this is what allows you to have the skill to respond instead of react. Very powerful. When you allow yourself to just drop whatever matters are swirling around in your mind, then you can start to understand, not just logically, but in experience, how it is the mind that causes the trouble and not the situation itself. And then you can get to feel what that feels like and you can understand it in a lived way. As beautiful as meditation, having a practice has been for me, I know that in and of itself is not freedom. It can be its own hiding place. It can have its own traps and egos. For one, it's very common to want to bypass the human experience because it does feel so good to be in these states. This can look like avoiding responsibility or almost dissociating to, like, let me go into my inner place. This is what we do as children, and so now you found a fancy way to do it as an adult. It can also keep you seeking. It can keep you wanting to feel those ecstatic states, and again, you're expecting a certain phenomenon to occur, and you've got to learn how to even lose the attachment for losing attachment itself. And so that's a whole thing. Still, in a lot of the healing world, whether it be therapeutics, scientific, or spiritual and more emotional, I do see that a lot of discussions are about changing how we relate to the world, reframing how we relate to the world, having compassion for the other person, or just challenging your assumptions about the other person. It's helpful, but I want to suggest that instead you bring the focus into yourself and how you relate to yourself always first. Because what I have found is that a true healing, true inner healing, it has a blend of all of the best qualities of every modality. It will take the insights of therapy and the devotion and open-heartedness of spirituality mixed with the awareness of mindfulness that creates this beautiful blend, this like delicious elixir that helps you live in the way where you feel connected and ease and joy. And of course, self-love that is purely mental isn't it either. You can't just tell yourself, I love myself, or write, I love this about me. I love this. So these are great starting points, but they're again mental concepts. Those are just more ego, but it's posturing in a nicer disguise, something that seems more helpful. The way that I experience true love, true self-love, is like a fusion of those things. It's like knowing myself as a deep source energy because of my meditation practices, but it's also in the world acting and doing in compassionate ways to myself, and also having the humility to have self-inquiry, to question myself, and also know when the questioning is harmful to me. And that is how I cater to myself, is the blending and taking the best of those worlds. The best part about it is that when you engage in these self-loving practices, then you are bringing in connection because you start to meet other people who know themselves as someone who is capable of giving and receiving love. You're not meeting people who are horribly blocked in either of those, in giving or receiving. Well, none of us are perfect, but you see that you start to attract better quality people because you believe in your capacity to love, and the other person believes in their capacity to love, and they believe in love. And so you start to connect on a soul level in your soul to soul meeting in this world. And that is so fulfilling. Friendships come easier, community comes easier, because you're not in constant doubt of your worthiness of it, and you are allowing it in. I don't think it's about staying in shadow work, and I don't think it's about staying in light work all of the time, because shadow work mode all the time is heavy, and it's implying that there's always something wrong with you. I don't see healing as just facing shadows or always cultivating light, learning how to move gracefully and fluidly between the two, in a place where you can honor discomfort and then also celebrate your capacity for joy. And so the video really isn't about picking a method, it's more about just awareness. Awareness to notice when the tools are not working, when you're doing the practices and something feels wrong, knowing to trust that. Even if you're going to some therapist who everybody swears by, but internally when you talk to them, when you leave, when you do the work, something doesn't feel right, to trust that. And alternatively, if you're in a spiritual community who is egging you on to, like, let's go do more healing work, let's go do another ayahuasca ceremony, let's go do this, and something internally is like, I don't think I need that, to trust that, to not let yourself be swayed by your surroundings, and know that you know what's right for you. And maybe that works for them and that feels good to them. But checking in with yourself every step along the way and saying, does this still feel aligned or right? Or am I doing this only now because of routine, or because this is the way that I've always done it? Or this is what my sister said to do. This is what whoever I trust told me to do. Only you know what it feels like to be you. And only you pick up the pieces of what it feels like to be a scattered version of you. And only you will feel that ecstasy and joy of true alignment. And that's why this is so individual. And the call to action, if there is one in this video, is to make sure that first and foremost, your comfort and your heart are leading the way and leading the charge. It doesn't matter what authority anyone has or apparent authority they have to tell you something, to suggest something to you. It's about seeing where you are and then clearly gauging what's next and using yourself as your compass. You'll never be steered wrong. And how do you know? I believe that the gauge is love. If you feel like you are moving to more capacity for love, if you feel like you're able to give and receive more love, if you're able to see love in the mundane through whatever practices you're doing, then there's a good chance that that is healthy and good for you. Keep in mind, though, it doesn't have to be a steady increase. So don't have this expectation that there's a perfect parabola this way of increased love, and it's going to be on this clear trajectory. And it's not like that. You might have moments where it stagnates, and then knowing that the most loving thing, or the way that you can cultivate more love, is to love even the stagnant plateaus, or what appear to be stagnant plateaus. An example of that is to be hard on yourself when you feel like you've fallen short of absolute perfect unconditional love. I must be extremely loving. I must already know how to be the perfect nurturing mother to everybody. And having that expectation of yourself might not be the loving thing for you. That's the the paradox. That's where everything always, there's no one way of thinking can you take it all the way to the end and it will be true all the way to the end. It's always going to collapse onto itself. That's why you pause and you go, wait a minute. I want to be a source of love, but right now I'm being hard on myself for not being a perfect source of love. Is that love? And that is shadow work. That's why you can't just have only light work. That's why there has to be a little bit of it in my worldview. And what I'm saying right now, you can reject, and that's your power. And so own, love, exercise it. Another gauge for you is how much ease do I feel within myself? How much ease do I feel for being who I am in this world and expressing myself the way that I do in this world? If it doesn't feel easy, what's the easier thing to do now? The easier thing would be to be okay with it not being easy. That's ease. Those are a couple just questions that you can ask yourself to check in from time to time. And then what I find is that when you are able to feel ease in moments that would typically really rile you up, that's when you see what people refer to as like quantum leaps of healing. That's what it means to truly change or transform, is that when something that historically would have caused you a lot of disease, unease, is not at this time because of the practices that you've been doing. That's true transformation. That's the change that I talk about. And what's great about it is that in the definition and in everything that you did, it was no forcing. It was just allowing. And that's why I don't see striving as necessary for change. And that's a huge common misconception of people that I talk to in the real world. They'll say like, yeah, I just feel like you get complacent. You become this passive complacent person in life when you follow these practices of ease and allow. And then the fear is that that leads to stagnation or there's no growth there. But it's like, no, you chose the effortless path. And it's just exactly what I just described, is like, if I'm not feeling ease, let me bring ease. And now you've changed. You see? This is what it means to not force and just to surrender to the moment, is just what I just described. There's another common question of, well, okay, how do you live with the seeming contradiction of taking the actions necessary to live a balanced life and accepting what is so much so that you don't need anything to change? Here is the subtle detail that I think gets missed, is that just because you don't need or insist that something changes doesn't mean that it won't, just by allowing. A lot of people believe that non-resistance means nothing gets done, you just give up, you lose your passion, but that's not true. And a lot of times the people who believe this have never tried it. They just don't want to try it because that's what they believe. But if you just tried it, then you would see that it's not true. It just means that you don't need things to change. You're not striving for things to change in order for you to feel content and aligned and well and healthy and accomplished and successful. It is another possibility of seeing the world, another reality where health and balance are a byproduct of living in acceptance. I understand. I mean, we've been taught and conditioned to do the opposite, to really force and strive and do things that we don't want to do and put up with conditions we don't want to and settle. That's what we've been taught to do. It feels like it could never be that simple, or almost even some of us might feel like, I don't want it to be that simple, because then my whole life, what does that mean for my whole life? I've lived my life raging against what is. And if you're telling me that it's that simple, that makes me mad. So I will give a real life situation of where I use non-resistance to actually get a lot accomplished. It used to be that I would have these really low energy days, and I had this all or nothing mentality years ago, where if my day started off really sluggish and slow, if I slept in and I didn't get to cleaning right away, it felt like the whole day was a waste and like I couldn't come back from it. And what that would do is it would put me in kind of a depressed, like couch locked state where I'm like too overwhelmed to do anything and too down on myself because I'm such a slob and so lazy and like, why can't I get it together? That it would lead to an entire wasted day until I would build up the desire to set the alarm and have the willpower to do it right the next day. I'm filled with these creeping thoughts that I should be using my time differently, that I'm not actually able to use the time that I'm couch locked to relax, because internally I'm in a lot of turmoil about the fact that I'm not doing anything. But I don't have I couldn't even get up to even drink water. This is a deep kind of depression. It was very paralyzing. And I started to lessen the resistance by eliminating the judgment and instead seeing the low energy as my body's need to rest. I would just remind myself that when I have the energy, I'll get it done. It always gets done. I would see that I'm energetically low, and so I would allow myself to rest. Now, I'm combining methods here because it is the therapeutic reframing of the situation. It's also getting into mindfulness. So sometimes when I'm in those states, I would take that as an opportunity to focus on my breathing or to meditate. And then something else that I would do, I remember this happened to me. This scenario happened maybe a month ago or maybe 2 months ago. Can't remember now, but I was able to reach over and I had a water bottle thankfully next to me because I wasn't going to go get up to get one. But luckily I had a water bottle and I grabbed the water, I held it in my hands, and then I prayed into it. And so you can see how I'm mixing modalities here. I'm using a little bit of therapy techniques, a little bit of spirituality and faith, a little bit of mindfulness. And then just a few minutes later, when I felt nice and rested, I got up and I did probably like 3 hours work of housework in like an hour. And it was like I was floating about my apartment, and it was not something that I dreaded. It didn't feel like any effort at all. It all got done. It was like dropping the resistance was what actually allowed me to get up and do it. It didn't take any thought, it didn't take any effort. It was easy. It was easy. Finding balance in your day can look like, yes, making plans for your future. Practicing non-resistance doesn't mean that you no longer make a plan to go out with someone. That's a misunderstanding. You also leave room for recapitulations and inner integration. The world, you interact with the world and then you come home to yourself. It looks like taking time to care for your body, and if you enjoy physical exercise or tai chi or yoga, that you make it a priority and schedule it in, prioritizing that present awareness that you can start to trust, because you know that the impulses that come from that state of stillness will steer you in whatever it is that you need most. And sometimes that looks like canceling the yoga appointment. But you will know, the more that you know yourself, when that urge to do it is coming from a healthy place or an avoidant place. But it just takes the practice and the inquiry in the awareness. It's honoring the truth of the moment during low energy days and leveraging high energy, and knowing that the one constant in life is change, and the pendulum will swing. And if you're feeling this way now, doesn't mean you'll feel like this for the rest of your life. You're feeling tired now, you'll have the zoomies in a few hours. So when I have the zoomies, I'll get a lot done. And then that helps me to not be at war with myself. You have moments where you can feel the depth of yourself in nature. If you're not someone who meditates, you can go out in nature. You can be around pets and babies, and you can create art and just create a little bit of calmness in your day, keeping your focus on the wholeness that is you exactly as you are. That is so huge. That's such a critical component of seeing that you're right on time. And so everything that I've just described is my picture, my definition of a truly fulfilling life. And what I would advise is to fall in love with the ebb and flow, and to really dedicate that time to picking what you prefer to experience with clarity, because you know what the opposite of it is through your lived experience. And that way you're transforming the deep traumas that you've been through into the very thing that liberates you from them. And nothing outside of you had to change to do that. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for watching.